Welcome once again, as I told you last Wednesday. Today we will hear the stories of an important doctor from Buenos Aires who shares with us some of the many things that have happened to him over the years. These are experiences that are truly incredible and leave us thinking about how many things happen out there without us realizing it. Send your experience to the WhatsApp number currently shown on the screen. It doesn't matter how many voice messages you send or how long they are. And you can also add photos, videos, or anything else you think is necessary to make your story as complete as possible. And remember that this coming Wednesday at 10 o'clock at night, a new segment called Stories from the Other Side will begin on the channel. An interview segment where we will not only get to know different people and different stories, but we will also talk about some topics in more depth, which to this day still leave us with a lot of questions. Friends, with that said, let's get started right now with this new video. Enjoy it! I've been a doctor for many years, and over time, in the different places where I've worked, I've come across hundreds of stories experienced by friends and colleagues. Many don't dare to talk about it, while others do so openly. But you always have to keep in mind that hospitals, and even more so private clinics, don't want these issues to go beyond the internal hallways because reputation can often harm the institution. From my point of view, as a doctor, I know very well what goes on inside health centers. These events that have no explanation are more real and common than people think. Today I want to tell you about 3 experiences that happened specifically to me and that in some way changed the way I think and process all these strange things we live with every day.
Like I told you in the text message, these are 3 different stories that happened to me at 3 different times in my career. Although there were other things that happened, I think these were the most striking, so to speak, and the ones that left the biggest mark on me. Especially because even today, I remember it as if it happened yesterday. And honestly, they're a bit more chilling, so to speak.
This first story took place in 2004, which I remember vividly due to the tsunami that struck Thailand. I had graduated as a doctor and had been practicing for 2 years, and that December I was on call. On the 24th and part of the early morning of the 25th, of course. Then I went home to rest because on the morning of the 26th I had to go back to the hospital. What you're about to hear happened during the early morning of that day, the 26th. It was one of the strangest events I had experienced up to that point, and it left me thinking, what lies beyond our own understanding, what lies beyond logic? Because it really was something shocking that helped put what happened into context. Let me tell you that at that time I was living in my grandmother's house with my grandmother. She had been widowed just a short time before. She was elderly and I decided to live with her so that in some way she wouldn't feel so alone, and also so I could be with her and look after her in case she felt unwell. The house was a chorizo-style house. The first room had once been used as a shop, which my grandmother ran. The middle room belonged to my grandmother, and the last one was the one I was using. All the rooms faced the street. That same early morning of December 26th, while I was sleeping, or rather, I woke up because of something unexpected. Something, someone, or I don't know what to call it, pushed me in bed. And I'm not talking about something mild, because it could have been some kind of body reflex that made me move. It wasn't like that. I felt the push on my back, and it was so strong that I was practically left hanging. I held onto the nightstand, and thanks to that I didn't fall. I turned around immediately and turned on the light. I admit that I got really scared because nothing like that had ever happened to me before. And I'd also like to clarify that it wasn't sleep paralysis. I know very well what it is, how it feels, and what medical factors can trigger paralysis. In this case, it was something different. And to clear up any doubts, you're going to find out what happened next. Because, from my point of view, at that moment it was related to both fear and confusion itself. I left the room to make sure my grandmother was okay. When I opened the door to her room, do you know how I found her? She was peacefully asleep. She didn't wake up at any moment, much less come near my room. Although if she had done it, it would have been impossible for me not to see or hear her. So what happened then? Now, perhaps I'll answer that for you. After visiting my grandmother, I enter my room and, for some reason, approach the window facing the sidewalk. And I see through the blinds a person who was lying in the middle of the street. I had no idea who it was, but what was certain was that they were in bad shape. I hurried to go out, and it was at that precise moment that the doorbell started ringing insistently. Both the doorbell of my grandmother's house and also the one at my mom's house, who lived in the back. Let's remember it was the middle of the night. What I told you had just happened to me a little while ago. And now this situation?
At that time, my late father also lived there. And when I opened the door that connected everything and connected, let's say, to the outside, to the street, my old man was coming in and he says to me, "Please hurry up. Lito is lying on the floor. Lito was my neighbor, okay?" When I got closer, let's say, he had passed away. And then, of course, I grabbed him. I check his vital signs. The bare minimum, I make the diagnosis, he doesn't respond, he isn't breathing, I start doing compressions to try to revive him. When asked how long he had been in cardiac arrest, he clarified, no, he started feeling bad, so we brought him here before he could get in the car. Right when he gets here to the sidewalk, he collapses, he goes down. How long ago was that? Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. His brother tells me that was the time it took from the push I got until, let's say, I got out. Imagine. It was just a few minutes. Imagine how it would be in the summer. And I remember I was in my boxers. I threw on a polo shirt. I couldn't even put on my flip-flops. And just like that, we put him in the car. I kept massaging him, let's say, all the way to the hospital, which is just 4 blocks from an interzonal hospital. They took him down to the emergency room, and unfortunately, a few minutes later, they confirmed that he had died,
It was impossible for me not to relate one thing to the other. I felt that strong push, and then I found this neighbor lying on the asphalt. It was as if some energy had woken me up. I insist, in a very unpleasant way, because I was really scared. But surely with the purpose that I would try to help this neighbor, or why not accompany him in that last moment? I know that maybe it's not an experience that causes fear, but it is a situation that makes you rethink many of the ideas that we don't have completely clear until now. A few years later, I was doing my specialty in infectious diseases at Argerich Hospital in La Boca. I went to this place from Monday to Friday, and on weekends, I had no other choice but to work in other places. Since I'm from the south side, I was working at a major clinic in Avellaneda. At that time, it was a majestic place where not only did we work in a comfortable, organized and clean way, but it also had a very pleasant atmosphere. But in general, the salary for on-call doctors was very, very good. Basically, when we took the on-call shift, we had to check on all the patients in the entire inpatient ward, and once that task was done, we were available for any emergency that might come up.
So, I arrive. During shift handover, my colleague updates me on each patient's status, referring to them by their bed numbers. When we got to bed 12, we had a peculiarity. All the rooms had 2 little beds. Is that okay? Except for a few that were for the famous prepaid, Jose. Let's say that one was preferential, they had only 1 bed, but they were on another floor, and that's basically where we would go. Very few times. Because it was left in charge, let's say, of the staff doctors, so to speak, who were the ones who went from Monday to Friday and so on. We could admit patients, but we didn't do it ourselves. The follow-up.
Something that happens in many hospitals is related to the number 13, the nurses, who are the ones always there day in and day out and at all hours with the patients. I'm sure you'll agree with what I'm about to say. Many times, whether it's the room number or the bed number, it's often avoided if possible. Of course, it's because of beliefs and also because of the number of stories in hospitals that are connected to this number. In this clinic specifically, beds 12 and 13 were together and they tried to keep them empty, only using them when there was no other option due to an emergency. Or they were reserved for patients who were in their final moments, usually due to terminal illnesses. That time, my coworker showed me that there was a patient in bed 12. He was an oncology patient and unfortunately he was in his final moments. There was no reason to move him to intensive care, since in cases like this, we try not to subject the patient to unnecessary interventions. Therefore, he was kept stable, but we were expecting that in the coming days, or vite, in case you were wondering. Bed 13 was empty, and this man had no family. The only visitor he received was a neighbor from his neighborhood. The thing was that I started making the rounds visiting each patient until I got to the room with bed 12. The man was in a coma, so taking advantage of the moment, I sat down to the side. I grabbed one of the little tables they used to serve breakfast and meals, and I started to organize the papers I had in the folders a bit. Just like that, I also made some notes about each progress of the last patients I had seen. At that moment, something happened that still gives me chills to this day. And I ask you to just imagine being there for a second so you can feel, even if it's just a little, what I felt that day. I was sitting in total silence in front of this man who had been in a coma for 3 days. Not only did he not have any kind of motor response, but there was also no favorable progress, in fact, quite the opposite.
The opposite.
This was on a Saturday, after 10:30 at night. While I was still organizing and writing in the folders, I noticed that something was moving in front of me. I looked up and saw something incredible. This guy sat up in bed with a completely normal movement, and not only that, he turns his head, looks at me with a smile, as if we had been friends our whole lives, as if I had just told him a joke or we were just chatting seconds before.
About something?
I was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't understand what was happening. Because, I repeat, this patient was in his final stage of life and had been in a coma for 3 days. But something else happened.
And just like that, with a smile, he makes a 3 with his index, middle, and thumb fingers. And then honestly, even today, it still gives me chills. As I'm telling you this, I get a cold shiver down my back. Instead of stopping to ask, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" I grabbed all the folders and ran out. I went to the nursing office. The nurses asked me up, "Doc, what happened to you?" Well, I was pale, completely pale, you know? I couldn't even speak, so I put down the folders, grabbed them, and went back to the room. I thought, poor guy, what if he woke up and I ran out and he needed something, you know? So I come back with the oximeter, I come back with the stethoscope, and when I get there, he was just like always. I mean, he was still in the same coma as before. I had seen him asleep. He didn't have any kind of reaction with the same severe symptoms he already had. All right, I'm going to bed after finishing my rounds and taking care of everything. I must have gone to sleep around 1:30 or 2 in the morning with him. At 3:05 in the morning, the phone rings and he calls me. The nurse was calling me. He says, "Doc, please come down. The patient in bed 12 just died at 3 in the morning." Also, I'm telling you, I have goosebumps again. So while I went down, confirmed the death, and clearly, according to what the nurses say, he died at 3 in the morning. Imagine he was hooked up to some monitors. And clearly the nurses keep watching each monitor for any changes. At 3 antemeridium, the alarm started going off, not because he had been unplugged as he was in a coma, but because he had died.
This last thing I'm going to tell you happened to me very recently, right before the pandemic. In this case, I apologize, but I won't be able to say exactly where it happened because I still work at this place and I don't want to have any kind of problems. Anyway, you should know that it's a very important place. And not only did this happen there, but there are many stories, each one more incredible than the last. From hearing wails, seeing shadows, hearing voices of people who aren't there, even finding footprints that appear out of nowhere. As soon as I started working in this place, not only did I learn about all these stories, but I also found out what the possible cause of all this paranormal activity is. And, as far as we know, this place was a clandestine detention center during the last military dictatorship. When I found out about this, a lot of the things that happened in there started to make more sense. And it even gives you a feeling of sadness mixed with the fear itself that something like that could happen to you.
At that time I used to smoke. I would go to a place to smoke, let's say, a little terrace. And that terrace bordered, let's say, it was like a hallway that was closed off. And the tape dated back to 1983. That tape was never touched. Also, it's not that it's cut or broken. No, that door is blocked, but it's blocked in such a way it says do not enter, in such a way that I can assure you it's scary. I mean, you really don't know for sure. I honestly don't know what's in there, but people prefer not to go in and prefer not to investigate. When you ask what's inside, firstly, no one knows. And what about the oldest one, or the one who's been working there for years? Those are the ones who tell you. Well, there are a lot of stories going around that there are places you can't go into. Well, not related to paranormal activity, but maybe with hidden things and so on. But still, let's say when you go down to the basements, you start hearing other things. You hear people talking in hallways where there's no one. The institution, even though it works, operates 24 hours. After 5 in the afternoon, not even a soul is left. There's very few people, let's say, working in some floors, which is where the information technology area is. But in the basements, there's practically no one. There are the police officers who are stationed in a specific spot, especially near the entrances. Do they do any patrols? But maybe there are offices with doors locked with padlocks, and they also have bars because maybe they're historical archives, and there are a lot more things. I can assure you that the cold you feel in there is such that you don't even need to turn on the air conditioning in the summer, just to give you an idea. Then you hear voices, and what's striking is that sometimes you see hands on some doors that have glass. You can even see a hand resting there.
The other thing that happened to me several times was arriving around 8 at night, parking the car and entering the building. And when I was about to take the elevator, many times you would find it apparently working. Wrong, I mean the doors would open and close constantly. One of the security guys, a veteran, had told me that this only happened when there was no one around. During the day, it was normal. And he recommended that when I go up, I make the sign of the cross, because many times it's not something bad, it's just that these souls simply want to get attention. Believe it or not, I would go up, make the sign of the cross, and the elevator would work perfectly fine, except for one time. What happened was while I was going up, exactly. Both on the ceiling and on the walls of the cabin itself, something started banging really hard. The fear was tremendous, but honestly it was because I thought something bad was happening with the elevator, and it was just a matter of seconds before it literally fell. But apparently it had nothing to do with anything mechanical.
As soon as all this happened, when that noise is heard, I feel something like a chill running right through my ear, like someone was blowing directly into my ear. I insist, I was alone. It was very late at night. There was no one in the place, and clearly there was no wind. I mean, the wind hadn't gotten trapped inside. I felt like someone had blown in my ear. Another time, I must have turned pale because when I arrived at the medical office, everyone looked at me and asked if I was okay.
This place where we worked to provide medical services used to be used as a rest area. There were not only places to sleep, but also to eat and even to take a shower. And there's a story here that at first I thought was a joke, but then I found out it wasn't, that it was real, and that many people had the bad luck to see it. The story dates back several decades, when a woman made the final decision to hang herself. Since that moment, her soul and energy have haunted this building, and occasionally some people manage to see her. In fact, more than one person quit because of the fear they experienced when they encountered her. I admit that luckily I never saw her. One night, I had finished my work, there was absolutely no one left in the department, so I tidied up a couple of things and got ready to leave. It was intense that as I was leaving and locking up the area, I heard a noise. It was a strange noise, one I couldn't quite understand, and it was coming from the back. I go back inside, turn on the lights, walk over and find that the radio we used to listen to during our shifts was on, tuned to a station that was just playing white noise, nothing else. But do you know what the scariest part of this was? The reason I practically ran out. We used that radio all the time, every day. But the main rule, for safety reasons, was that when we left, it not only had to be turned off but also unplugged. That night, when I bent down, it was a big surprise, a scary one actually, because I found that it was indeed unplugged from the outlet. However, it was on, emitting that white noise that started to terrify me. And let me make it clear right away, it didn't have any batteries or a backup battery that could power it. At that moment, I took a few steps back and the radio turned off. You can imagine that I left as quickly as I could, locked the door and left.
Honestly, I never found out what that thing with the radio was. But I can assure you that later, after seeing a lot of things, like I told you in the text, I'm a guy who investigates pretty deeply. I read quite a lot. I listen to a lot of stories about paranormal things. And then, well, there are the white noises, the famous white noise, sometimes even without being connected to 220.
Thank you for making it to the end. Without a doubt, they were incredible experiences, each with its own special touch, and I think that's the nicest thing about these topics. See you in a few days with the new segment. I'll be waiting for you this Wednesday at 10 at night. I'm signing off now. See you in a few days. Is it time now? Sending a big hug to all of you. Thank you.